Welcome once again to the complete free Flutter course presented by the same person as always, and that is myself, Ovidius Mazuru. So if you guys don't recall from last time, we spoke about Redux in Flutter, and we took a look at the store, reducers, and action, which are essential for making a Redux store. And what we've done so far is we just made this quick app which can convert between kilometers and miles. So going here, we can type in a number, hit convert, and then we get that number in miles. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to expand upon what we did last time by learning about middleware. Because if you guys remember, right here, I had this big red comment. The following code belongs in middleware, not in reducers. So that's exactly what we're going to learn about today. And then after I finish going through this and making this app work with middleware, I'm actually going to give you guys a bit of a challenge to expand upon this, make this app more, just have more features. And then we're going to go over how to do that together in the next video. But for now, let's talk about middleware. So what is middleware? I haven't pulled up the picture this time, I forgot. But if you guys remember from last time, the data flows in Redux through the reducers in the store, and we get to the reducers through actions. What middleware does is it inserts an extra step in between actions and reducers. So it gives us a chance to catch that action and do something with it before passing the action along to the reducer. And there's a lot of reasons to do this. The most obvious, the one we have right now, is because of stuff like this. We currently have logic in the reducers, and you know, there are different schools of thought about this. Some people like, I forget the exact words they use, if it's thin and thick, or if it's something like that, heavy and light. Reducers, I can't remember exactly. But essentially, some people think that it's okay to put a little bit of logic like this, so long as it's still a pure function. Other people think that reducers shouldn't have any logic at all, and really the only thing they should be doing is giving us that new state. Now, personally, I happen to be in the second school of thought. I don't like having any kind of logic here. And on top of that, there's also a bigger question of what happens if I have some kind of async function, right? What happens if I need to go get some data from the server? Well, it's not possible to have a pure function if I have an async function, because I don't know what's going to happen, right? If I'm trying to fetch some data, I have no way of knowing ahead of time if I'm going to have a server error or if it's going to go through or what's going to happen. So, I just can't have that pure function, cannot go into the reducers. And that is where the middleware comes in. So again, the middleware is that extra step which can do something before passing along that data to the reducers to be stored. And in our example, we're going to be factoring this out. But again, for other people, we might do other things. And the first thing I'm going to do is actually here my reducers. I'm going to change a tiny bit because I don't really like what I'm doing here. Instead, what I'm going to do is return. In fact, I don't even need to do that. And this isn't necessary. I was just thinking about the code afterwards, and I realized I don't really like the way I'm doing this. So I'm going to get rid of my new state. And here I'm just going to return my app state.copyWith, all of that. And then here I'm going to return my app state copy with, and I'm also going to add another else statement and return app state where the miles will be prev.miles and the prev states.miles it should be, and the km is going to be prev states.km, just like that. And I'm going to get rid of this. The reason I'm doing this is because so in the previous example, it wasn't going to happen. But now that we're inserting the middleware, it's possible for me to get an action which isn't going to be processed by the reducers. So I could have passed that along without anything happening. And then I'm no longer, I'm passing back the same state I received rather than recreating it, which is what I really should be doing. So that's why I'm making that change now. So I'm just going to get rid of this. And also to add more clarity, I'm going to add a print statement here, and I'm going to make it kind of like a line break. And then I'm going to type also print in the reducer. And this is just so that we can follow along that flow of data a bit more easily. Here I'm going to add another print statement, which is just going to print the action so we can see what action we receive. And I already have that print over here. I don't need this one anymore. And in fact, for the else, I won't need to. Okay, so now that we have this, we're going to right click on Redux, hit new file, and we'll call this middleware dot. And we can call middleware whatever we want. It really should be middleware though. We're going to make a new class, and we can call this. In fact, middleware is not a class, it is a function, it's a void function. And we can call this whatever we want. We should probably put the middleware in the title so it's more clear what it is. I'll just call it app state middleware. And by the way, it's perfectly reasonable for us to have many different types of middleware. We can kind of create a chain and say, oh, go through this middleware first, then go through this other one, then go through this other one. So you might often see stuff like that. And what our store is going to take is going to be the store of type app state. And we're going to call this store. And we need to import this from Redux, fix our imports. And then we're going to take the dynamic action. So remember from last time, action should be dynamic, because otherwise that's the way the Redux guys have done it. If I try to have my class and use polymorphism, it's going to get upset with me. And finally, we're going to take next dispatcher, and we're just going to call this next. Okay. So now what we're going to do is it's going to be quite similar to the reducers in that we're going to listen for the different types of action and do something based on each action. And the first thing I'll do is actually add a print statement in the middleware. And again, this is just going to help us actually see that flow of data. I'm going to say if action is, what are we looking for? Update KM. Converts. In fact, let's start with update KM, because one of the things I didn't like about my previous example here was, for example, right now I'm connected to a physical keyboard because I'm on my laptop, so I don't need to use this. I could use my physical keyboard, and then if I hit convert, you can see I got an error. It didn't break my entire app, but it also didn't go through. So, you know, that's not great user experience. So let's fix this up a little bit. And we have a few different choices. And what I'm going to do is I'll just have my app entirely ignore any non-numeric character. So if I say 1, W, D, whatever, 0, 0, it's going to count it as 100. And the way I'm going to do that is first I'll create a new action called updates KM cleaned extends action. And this is going to have the same payload as my update KM, which is going to be a string payload. It's going to be update KM. And this should actually be update KM cleaned because this is the constructor. And then we're going to have this star payload here. So it's the same as the previous one. Actions tend to be quite light. There's really not too much in them. And what we're going to do is we're going to listen to the update KM in my middleware. And I'm going to change the one in reducers to be update KM cleaned. And you'll see why in a second. So let's say update KM. And then we could do something in response to that. So what I'm going to do is say, and keep in mind my action payload is going to be the entire string I have over here. So I'm going to say for string C, because actually it's going to be a string of length 1, a character, but Dart doesn't have characters, it only has strings. For string C in action dot payload, so that's going to be the entire string here, dot split, and I'm going to split on nothing. So that's the empty and close quote. I couldn't remember the word for a second. So that's going to give me a list where each character is one item in the list. And then I'm going to say if is numeric C, then I'm gonna, and first let's actually make a string, cleaned string equals, and just an empty string. So if it is numeric, then we're going to say cleaned string plus equals C, and we're also just gonna very quickly say adding C to clean string so we can more clearly see what's happening. And we're also going to say cleaned string is, and have that over there. And if it is not numeric, then we're just going to say print and have the C is not recognized as numeric. So we're not adding it that. So that's fine. And here's our for loop, and that's fine. So that's going to go over each of the characters. If it's numeric, it's going to add it to the clean string. If it's not numeric, it is not going to add it to the clean string. And now that we have that, what we're going to do is say store. So we're getting the store here from the app state dot dispatch, and we're going to dispatch update km cleaned, which is going to take our clean string like that, right? Okay. And so that means here, instead of listening to update km, we're going to listen to update km cleaned. So by doing this, what we've done is we've guaranteed that the kilometers we store in our state is actually going to be just numeric. Now over here, we're still going to see the letters as well, but when we convert to the miles, we're going to use just the numbers. So that's going to be a little bit better user experience. You could also say that maybe we should get rid of the letters here, and we could do it that way as well. I'm just electing not to do it that way right now. We could do a similar thing over here. Now, obviously, is numeric does not exist yet, which I think is kind of an oversight on Dart's part, because I'd really expect a modern programming language to have is numeric, but that's fine, we can create one. So we're going to say bool is numeric, and this is going to take a string C, and let's make a really quick doc string. So is numeric takes a string of length 1, returns true if string is numeric, returns false otherwise. Okay, pretty simple. And what we're going to do, this might seem a little bit funky. For those of us that have worked with computer science before, should be pretty obvious. For anyone who hasn't, a string, you know, some kind of character, it represents the numbers as well as the letters. So 1, 2, 3, it has a certain ASCII code, and other letters have different ASCII codes. All right, I'm not very good at explaining this, but that's because I'm not going to make an entire lesson about it. So yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail. But just know that behind the scenes, an A as a string and a 1 as a string are both represented by some kind of number, right? So we can actually compare them when they are strings. And what I'm going to do here is say c.compare2, and I'm going to compare it to 0, but 0 as a string. And I'm going to say if that's greater or equal to 0, and c.compare2 9 greater or equal to 0, and this should be less than or equal to 0. Okay, I believe that's correct. This might be wrong, but I believe it's correct. We're going to have to double check. So what compare2 is going to do is going to return 1 if C is greater than what we're comparing it to. We're going to return 0 if they are the same, and we're going to return -1 if it's less. So if my character here is a 1, I'm going to get a 1, and that's going to say true. And then this does the opposite, compares it to 9. So my 1 compared to 9 is going to give me a -1. So this is going to come back as true. and that should be correct. I might have to double check these afterwards. And if you don't understand it too well, don't worry about it too much. Okay, so this should be it for actually fixing this. And then one more thing we're going to have to do is say else if action is convert, because I want to move my logic from here into here. And for now, let's just delete this. I'm going to copy paste this. We're going to get rid of all this afterwards. And let's see what we can do here. So my KM as double is going to be my store. So I'm getting the store from here, dot state. This lets me access the state in the store, dot KM. And now this will not give me an error. Previously, this could have given me an error because there could have been letters in it, but now because I've done this part, it can't. It's only going to be numbers, so that's fine. And then miles as double is going to be KM as double times that, so that's fine. And then what I'm going to do is say store.dispatch update miles. And this is going to give me miles as double, like that. And this doesn't exist yet, so I'm going to go into my actions and say class update miles extends action. And this is going to take a string payload, and that means I'm going to have to update it in the middleware. Update miles this dot payload, like that. So here now it's going to give me an error because this is a double, so I'm going to have to say toString here, like that. I could also use a different function to have less or more numbers at the end here, but I'm going to leave it like this for now. I'm going to leave the default specificity. And finally, I'm going to need to use this next here. And all I'm going to do is say next action. And what this is going to do is, so the middleware, remember, is something that just goes between the action and the reducers. But sometimes the middleware has nothing to actually do. So it's going to receive all the actions, check to see if it needs to do anything, but then if it has nothing to do, it still needs to pass it on to the reducer so the reducer can actually do whatever it needs to. And that's where next action comes in. That's just saying, I'm not doing anything with it, but pass along the action so that the reducer can still take care of that action, even if I won't. Okay, so we're back in the reducer. We no longer need to listen to convert because we're doing that in our middleware instead. So we can get rid of all this. Instead, we're going to say else if action is update miles. And remember, so this one's just going to be the one we just created. And we're going to return appState.copyWith. And prev is going to be the prev state. And it should be capital. And miles is going to be action.payload. So look at this. Now our reducers are so simple. They're so skinny. Really the only thing they're doing is they're just giving us a new state where we're really only updating this action.payload and everything else stays exactly the same. It's very little that we're actually doing, and that's perfectly fine. That's the way it should be. Now that we have all of this, the only thing left to do is actually update it where we create the store, which was in our main.data over here. And here, where we have store, app state, we have our reducers first and our initial states. Now we can also give it a middleware. And middleware actually takes a list because it's so common for us to have a chain of different middlewares. In fact, it's a bit uncommon to have a single one, but that's the way we're doing it here. So here we're just going to give it the app state middleware. And we don't need to... Did I misspell it? I should not have used the capital here. It should be lowercase. And then we just need to import this, fix the imports, like that. And of course, the first time you type this out, it might try to give you all of these things as well, but keep in mind we're just passing in a reference to it, so you don't want to have all those things. The Redux library knows how to insert the store and the action and the next dispatcher, so we don't need to do that manually. So there is that. Assuming I haven't made any mistakes, it should work correctly. So let's go ahead and see what we have. I'm restarting this. And it's remembered the thing from the last time. So let's actually get rid of all of this first. And try again to restart. I'm going to make this bigger so we can actually see that flow of data. So when I hit the 1, it goes into the middleware, adding 1 to the clean string. Clean string is 1. It goes to the middleware again. The reason it's going to the middleware a second time. So the first time it received that, I'm trying to find exactly, no, I don't want to find exactly where it is. First it's receiving update KM, and that goes through the middleware. It recognizes it here. It does all of this. Then it dispatches updates KM cleaned. Once it has this dispatched, this again goes through the middleware first, but this time it checks this if statement, nothing to do. Checks this if statement, nothing to do. So then it goes next action. That's why we have in the middleware twice. So first here and then over here. And once it goes to next action, that's when we get in the reducer. It gets passed in through here. And then it gets checked, is it update KM cleaned, which in this case it is. So it's giving me the action here. And then it's giving me the new app states with the updated correct kilometers. And again, I really should have been looking at it over here, not in the previous place. Okay, so we can do that. Now let's see what happens when we hit convert. So that works as well. Convert similarly will go, and I lost where I was before. It goes through the middleware. I apparently forgot to put any print statements over here. So I'll just put one over here, print action is convert, just so we can see that flow of data. And I'm gonna restart it. So we put the 1, put the 2, convert, and we can see this works as well. We can have action is convert over here. And now let's see what happens if I try to type in something else. So if I put W, we go through the reducer and the middleware, but it doesn't break it like it did previously. And we can see here it's saying W is not numeric, D is not numeric, F is not numeric. And then we can add more numbers at the end, 0, 1, 2. And when we hit convert, this time, instead of breaking like it did previously, it's just going to give me the miles, ignoring all these letters that I had in between. And as I mentioned, you could do it differently if you wanted. It would be quite simple to instead say that we'll only even add the number to the string if it's numeric, but I chose to do it this way. Both are perfectly fine. Okay, so there you have it, gentlemen. And this is actually it for Redux. This is everything you need to know. By using the reducers, action, store, and middleware, you have a complete working Redux store. And this middleware is where we can add all kinds of logic. We can add async functions. We can add all kinds of checks or whatever we need. But I did mention that I was going to have a little bit of a challenge for you guys at the end. Right now, our app is perfectly fine. It works, but it's a little bit light on features. How many times am I actually going to be comparing just kilometers to miles? Well, maybe quite often. For myself, maybe I'll do it quite often, but other people might not. But it would be really useful to have this app to compare all kinds of different information. So let's say instead of having kilometers here, I could have some kind of drop down where I could choose kilometers or miles or whatever. And then here I had a different drop down. Instead of miles, I could choose whatever I want to move it into. And then I could have some kind of table or something like that behind the scenes, which compares the different values. And then I can get a different value from all kinds of different numbers. So instead of just being kilometers to miles, I can make it all kinds of units to all kinds of other units. And obviously that's going to be more stuff in the middleware. It's going to require us to have a few more actions. It's going to require us to compare different values and also have some more information in the store. For example, what we're comparing and what we're comparing to. So I think that's a really good challenge for you guys, because we've already covered everything you need to know to complete it, but at the same time, it's not super simple either. So you can really stretch that brain muscle and it's going to be amazing. All right, guys, so that's going to be it for this video, and be sure to tune in next time when I go through the solution to that challenge. In the meantime, myself, Ovidius, I'm out.